How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
Hi there. Welcome to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein, and here we talk all things parenting with the experts. Of course, a big thank you to Maine Health for sponsoring Raising Me. Today, we are jumping into one of those questions that so many of us face and will likely struggle with at some point. Should I get my child a cell phone? And if so, when? We are deep into this conversation at my house right now with my 12-year-old who does have it on his birthday wish list, of course. And we're just really hesitant to rip that Band-Aid off. I think part of it is probably just trying to preserve a little piece of childhood a little longer. And then there's, the part that they spend so much of their lives already, and then, of course, will into adulthood on various screens. So part of me just kind of wants to delay adding an additional one. And let's not even mention the inevitable social media pressure that follows once you get a cell phone. So we need some help. For that, we're turning to Joanne Grant. She is with Sweetser, a very prominent mental health care provider in Maine. She has worked with countless families and kids in her career, navigating mental health issues and substance use disorders. She is currently the Chief Growth Officer at Sweetser. So Joanne brings some really thoughtful and practical advice to these questions, from how to tell if your child is ready to the boundaries that you should put into place. And then how to also handle that, well, everybody has one conversation, which we are currently hearing all about, by the way. And of course, she went through all of it too with her own 2 daughters. So whether you're on the fence about getting a cell phone for your child, or you're just starting to feel the pressure of it, maybe you've already just gotten one, you're going to find some great takeaways in this conversation. Check it out. All right, Joanne, I am so grateful you are here, because I am telling you what, I am in the thick of this, as so many parents are. I have a 12, almost 13-year-old, and what is on his birthday list this year?
A phone.
A phone. And we haven't done it yet, and my husband and I are really struggling with this. I'm sure this is something that you encounter and have dealt with your own kids.
Oh my gosh, I feel for you. I really do. I knew that's where you were going. Absolutely. I encountered that right around the same age, in regard to a phone that had the capacity to have apps and social media. But I had to go back a couple of years when I let my kids start staying home alone a little bit off the bus. So that's around 10 or 11. And I didn't have a landline. I don't know if people have landlines anymore.
I don't know that they do, but I think that's why this is coming up around that time.
And it was really selfish reason for me to investigate it. I needed to be able to be in touch with them and have like a safety line when they were home alone. And then that developed into wanting, the smartphone and the apps. And those are all different conversations, of course.
You know what? I didn't even think about that, but I think that that's why this really comes up at the 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old age, because most people don't have a landline. It is the age where kids are able to stay home by themselves. And so as a parent, when you leave, you want to have some way to get in contact with them so you can understand, right? Like that would be sort of a sweet spot. Is there a right age to do this?
I think the first thing I want to say is there is no right or wrong answer to whatever you or any other family decide around this conversation and ask from your child. Research says 12 or 13 is the right time to start having these conversations, or an appropriate time. Every family is going to make a decision around what their child's readiness is and around their own values and how they operate as a family unit.
Why do you think that sort of 12, 13-ish might be a sweet spot?
I think, the piece that I just mentioned, we're allowing our children to have some independence. This is kind of the next phase. So being able to stay home alone is a way to test that independence. You want them to be safe while they're there. And then the other piece is this is the age that they're really starting to move away from you being the light of his eye every day.
I know, and I can't take it.
I'm
but that's
so
fine.
Sorry. Yes, and he is probably gravitating towards really wanting to get that connection with his friends in having that, listening to and participating in things with his friends. That has kind of moved up. Still loves you.
No, sure.
You're still
Sure.
the
Really?
main girl, but he wants to be able to have that with his friends. So
Of course.
Yeah.
And I think too is just like as parents trying to figure out what are the signs of maturity that do equal maybe my child is ready for a phone. So are there specific signs that show that they might be ready, at least to start? Maybe it's not the, with all the apps and all the social and all the things, but, are there specific signs of maturity?
I think a few things that I would look at is, if you have chores in the house, is there follow through with certain tasks or chores that the child has, being responsible? What's their level of responsibility? Is there a pet that they have to take care of, and do they follow through with feeding and walking and doing those things? How do they take care of themselves? So how responsible are they with the things that they have, or any other toys? Does your son have a gaming system?
Yeah, he has, what is it called?
I don't
It's a
either.
Switch, maybe?
Oh, I don't even know that
Okay,
existed.
thank you so much.
So, like, how does he take care of
Yeah,
that? Does he respect
yeah.
your rules around that? That might be a good test,
I also think in terms of like, do you have to remind them of these things? Like, not just that they can do them, but are you constantly reminding,
Yeah.
hey, did you feed the dog?
Yes.
Hey, did you do
Yes.
whatever?
If they need constant prompting, that might be a sign that it's not the right time.
What's your take on sort of starting slow with one of those phones, or I would say an Apple Watch? Because we did get an Apple Watch for him for Christmas. It wasn't this Christmas, the one before, just so that we could call or text him, and he could call text us. Obviously no apps, but what's your take on starting slow with a phone that might not have all the gadgets?
It's funny that you mentioned that. That's exactly what I did, because as I told you, it was more around the age of 10 or 11, and I absolutely knew my girls were not ready to have. And again, there's probably more platforms now, but what's the little ghost one?
Snapchat,
Instagram, all of that. So I got them a phone that did not have the ability to hook up to the internet or have those type of social media applications. And that was their first test. And then again, that sweet spot age 12 or 13 is when I had to make the decision. Do they get the full boat?
How do you start sort of like that trial period with a phone? Because, when you think about it too, kids today, and I always say that, I'm like, oh gosh, I sound so old, but there's not a lot of experience talking on a phone, really, right? Like, and even if when they have a phone, they're probably doing more texting or chatting or whatever. But what are some like good rules of etiquette even around a phone that we could start talking to our kids about?
I think one of the things I even say to my kids now, because I still pay their phone bill, you need to answer me. If you need to answer me, or I'm not going to pay for your phone anymore.
Okay, I love that.
Responsiveness.
Like be specific and intentional with that.
Yes. Answer my questions. Even if I'm just checking in, whether that's texting or if I'm calling, pick up. I think that's a reasonable request. Taking care of it. These phones are not inexpensive, so making sure that it's taken care of, it's not misplaced. You're not dropping it all the time, I think would be something to pay attention to.
Yeah, maybe a response within a certain period of time.
Sure.
I mean, like, I have an older daughter. She is 17. She has a phone. And, I realize sometimes she's driving or she can't answer. But I do like to have a response back within a few minutes if it's a reason, like not necessarily while she's at school. But is that reasonable to say, within 10 minutes, please respond to my texts?
I absolutely.
Because then I'm sending out the police.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The SWAT team. And yes, I agree. I think that all of those boundaries and expectations, when that phone is given, you sit down with your child and go over, here are my expectations. What do you hope to get out of this phone? Can you agree to this? And what will the consequences be, honestly, if you don't follow these expectations? I think having those things up front and being very transparent will help navigate that situation.
Did you hear from it with your girls that, everybody has a phone right now? That's what I'm starting to hear. Yes. And it's funny because I've asked a couple of parents like, oh, does so-and-so have a phone? No. It's like, well, that doesn't feel like everybody then. Yeah. So what is your response to that whole, well, everybody has a phone?
I mean, I've done this with you're going to hear that more than once for a bunch of other things that are going to be
because
asked
next
of you.
it will be social media or this app or
and
whatever.
You remember your parents probably said, oh, if everyone jumped off
a
the bridge, would you? So I don't say that.
Okay.
And that, but I do say, I'm not concerned about what everyone else is doing. How is this going to fit into our family? And why do you want this? That's putting the focus back on the individual and the family and how you're going to navigate this.
I think too, like it's fair for parents to want their child to have a phone for safety reasons. And, I hate that this is where it's gone today, but my daughter has had a scare at her school where she texted me from a closet. So, even if it's not the child who wants a phone, I can understand if a parent would just want their child to have a phone. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, and so not even the piece that we just talked about, if they're home alone, you need them to have the ability to call 911. That's actually part of the law. And also, there are more and more incidences at schools that are very alarming and traumatizing that involve lockdown procedures, even if it's real or a simulation. I do not think it's unrealistic to say get your phone. I want to be in contact with you. I want to know that you're okay. And in addition to that, I think, our kids these days participate in all kinds of extracurricular activities. They might be walking from place to place. They might be riding with people that are not you. And you want to be able to be in touch with them to make sure they're okay, make sure they're with the right people, and to be in contact for those periods of time. It feels selfish, but it is safety. It's what we do.
What's so different too than when we were this age is you could actually physically see where your child is with the phone too. Now that has some peace of mind. I know I have definitely checked the phone to see where my daughter is, whether it's just to make sure should we wait another 10 minutes until she gets home for dinner, or on a Friday, just making sure, like, I'm sorry, where are you? Again, and just double checking. So sorry, Livy. But, I also think on the flip side of that, I think there's really a problem with friends being able to see where their friends are at all times. And that's more of a social media app situation. But, what are the consequences of being able to just constantly be being checked in with your peers?
Yes. So I just want to go back to something that you said as we were telling our secrets. I want to tell you that my kids are 22 and 21, and I still look at them.
Okay, good.
When they were in college to make sure they went to bed. I don't care if it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't sleep. You're home, I'm done. I'm okay to rest. Totally. And that's just being a mom, right? I think the other piece is what my kids refer to as FOMO, fear of missing out. So when you're able to constantly scroll on your phone and see, oh my God, Liz and Joanne are at this place together and I wasn't invited, or such and such is doing this and they didn't call me. It just leads to a whole nother series of stressors and anxiety.
It's heartbreaking. Again, back when we were growing up, you might have thought maybe people were gathering at somebody's house, but maybe you wouldn't really know. Now you see it in real time.
No, you're right.
So talk about how does that impact mental health?
So it increases if someone is already susceptible, and we know our kids, whether or not they're diagnosed with an anxiety disorder or depression, there are always symptoms that come and go. Just being an adolescent and having all of those developmental pieces happen, I think it exacerbates that. It leads to having more stress, more anxiety, depression. If you're feeling isolated and alone and you're not included, that's definitely going to take a toll on your mental health, and that might interrupt your sleep, your focus for your schoolwork. It can be devastating. And I know as we sit here, we're like, oh, big deal. Someone did. I don't want to be invited to everything anymore.
Please, no, I want
to put my jammies on. But when you're that age and you get left out, it is like a stab in the heart.
Oh, it's hard. It is heartbreaking.
It is. And then as a parent, just being there to, we're laughing and joking about it right now, but to them really own and acknowledge that it is tough. And you hear them, and how can you support them? And
how can you? What are some, and inevitably when this comes up, and if your child shares it with you, what are some of those things that we can say and do to support them when you're seeing in real time that you're excluded or you weren't in a picture or whatever it might be?
I think finding out, well, why was that important to you? Why was that so important to you? Trying to saying you hear them and you understand and you're hearing how it hurt them, and trying to distract them by developing something else to do, something else to focus on, a different activity, inviting another friend somewhere, and really just preparing them for life in the future where you aren't going to be invited to everything.
Yeah.
And that's the reality.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
Also the comparison culture, I think, because inevitably when a phone comes, the next logical step, let's be real, is the social media. And there are a couple of things here because one, I think that is a way that a lot of kids are now communicating via social versus a text message. And so that idea of just feeling like I can't talk with my friends, everybody's messaging on Snapchat or TikTok or whatever that might be. Are there workarounds for that? I mean, I haven't figured it out, but like, initially before my daughter had, I can't remember what the app was, but of course we were the last person to allow her to get whatever it was. And like the soccer team was, I think it was Snapchat. I think the soccer team was coordinating
with one another
on Snapchat as a team, and she did not have Snapchat. So like, how do you navigate that?
I think in that particular scenario, and that was a similar experience when my kids played sports, and there were a few that didn't have that option, and they were older, but it was a family value, and we had to respect that. The family spoke to the coach, so it wasn't the family member seeming like they were being argumentative or causing conflict. And the coach said, hey, we need another mechanism to communicate that's inclusive to everyone. And what would that be? Is it email? Is it text messaging? You can't communicate about
via app. I love that.
Yes.
And that it's not coming from the kid, like the 15, 16-year-old or whoever it might be, isn't like, hey guys, what about me here? It's the parent, it's the adult going to the coach or whoever and saying, look, that's easier when it's a sports team. It is hard when it feels like all your buddies are just making plans through one of these apps.
Yeah, and that is so hard. I mean, that's really putting the kiddo in a tough position to either be embarrassed and say, I don't have this. I can't do this, and ask for a way to be included that fits them, that uses a different avenue. And that's really hard to do at that age. I don't think everyone has the skill set. So maybe asking mom for some help and some ideas on how to navigate that would be the best bet, because that's tough.
It is. And, like, how do you know whether is, so that's a lot with the teenagers. And I feel like the 14, 15, 16-year-olds. But like when it comes to like the kids who are asking for phones, how can you tell if it's just kind of them feeling peer pressure or they really want a phone? You know what I'm saying?
I think this day and age, it's real want and peer pressure, because this is how I was talking to Justin in preparation for this. I said, I used to go to the mall, the movies, roller skating. That's how we all kept in touch and socialized. That's not how things are any longer. And there's a billion reasons. We could have a whole nother episode of why. That is their lifeline to their peer group. And as I mentioned, your peer group is like number one at that age for yours, becoming number one. And you're really wanting to be connected, not isolated. So if a kid is looking at that as a way, that's a mechanism that's going to make them isolated from everyone else, that's a real feeling. I think as a parent, we could look at that and break immediately. If we had all these rules and we were going to say no, and that was presented to us, I think that would hit me right here in the heart and go, oh my gosh, I want you to be connected to your friends, and this might be the only way you can be.
I mean, but on the flip side too, like, could it also lead to further isolation? I mean, the thing is like, I have a child he's got all these great friends at school, but he's totally fine just reading all day or just hanging out at home. Like with a phone, you have even that, like you're already connecting via a screen in a phone versus going outside, meeting somebody at the end of the street to go play soccer or, so there is that balance too, that while it connects you, I think in some ways it also isolates you.
Yeah, you make a really good point. And that goes back to the very first piece. You're going to know your kid and your family's going to make the decision that's best for your kid and your values. If you had a young person who already was very isolated, maybe introverted, didn't have sports and friends and do things, and they were wanting that, and that was going to continue those behaviors that you were already a little bit concerned about, you might want to give a second thought to that or really set up some parameters to make sure you're watching for any more of that behavior that's isolating and not exposing them to social experiences. And then, the reverse is they just need to be socializing, and you might have to set limits. Be paying attention. Do you see changes in behavior? Your son was playing baseball. He was going roller skating. He was doing these things. And now all of a sudden his face is in his phone every day. That would be where I would intervene.
Like a red,
and say,
red
notice some
flag.
changes. We got to fix the rules here.
Yeah. So like in some ways, obviously it's got to be a balance, just like with so many things that maybe it's added communication, added way to connect with your friends. And I mean, it is a great way to plan in order to connect with your friends. But if that's the only connection is via a screen, that's not the kind of connection that we really want.
Well, and it's hard because I just, even schoolwork, sometimes you need your computer, your laptop,
for sure.
your
iPad
and your
all the kids
phone
have
to
iPads.
research things.
Yeah.
It's a learning tool as well. It's just like you said, the balance.
What is your take on those monitoring apps? Because it's like, on one way, you want to build trust. Another way, it's like, well, kind of putting a safety net around how they use their phones.
I think it's always a good idea, and I follow this rule in my clinical practice with kids, is starting off more strict and loosening up as you go along and you see that the expectations are being followed. So not having that security device or the way that you can watch it all the time, but start off that way to make sure your child was ready and your child is following the rules, and then you can loosen up a little bit.
Yeah. So, and I know there are a lot of them out there. Are some better than others? Like
I've got to tell you, I don't know.
Yeah. And I know even on a lot of the phones, you can say, turn it off at 8 p.m. and don't turn it back on until 8 a.m. or whatever it is. So it's kind of finding that.
Just like a remote control of your TV.
It's kind of.
I got to tell you, though, my experience has been our youth are very, very bright, and they are way more tech savvy than we are.
You don't
and
say.
So sometimes I wonder if we're doing that, and they're in their room going, "Haha, Mom, I knew how to take that off."
Of course. So, like, what is your best advice for parents who are on the fence about this right now?
I think, again, no judgment. Really follow what feels right for your family and your child, taking in all of those pieces around maturity level, responsibility. And like I mentioned, even some of those predisposition for anxiety and stress and depression or isolation, really taking all those factors in mind and balancing them with what are the benefits of the phone that we talked about, right? It's a safety, it's a connection, it's educational at times, and making a decision that is right for you and your family. And I know that sounds super cheesy and like an easy way out, but there is no right or wrong answer.
Yeah. That's the thing, which makes it so hard. Yes. And I know parents, if you are struggling with this right now, I see you because like every time I run into a parent, I'm like, so tell me, does so-and-so have a phone? When did you get them a phone? That kind of thing. And it's funny because we got our daughter a basic phone, which was so lame when she was 13. And so that's why sort of that added pressure. But once you go there, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, as they say. So we're just trying to be really intentional before we pull the trigger.
It's going to be good practice for you as a teenage mom of a teenager, because there are going to be more asks of you that are going to require you to follow a similar process. Why? What are the expectations? What happens what are the consequences? And are you ready for this? There's going to be so many more pieces of freedom that they want. This is just step one.
Oh, thanks so much, Joanne.
No, but you've got it. Like what you did with your daughter. It seems to be working. Yeah. So fall back on that too. If you have experience and it was successful, or even learn from the things that weren't successful.
Exactly. Yeah. Joanne, thank you so much.
You.
Really appreciate it.
It was fun.
So much fun. And of course, we'll have more resources as well on WGME.com/raising me. Such a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Okay. I really enjoyed that conversation with Joanne and appreciate her insight so much on this topic. I think a big takeaway, of course, there's no one size fits all here. You know when and if it is right for your family. There are all kinds of circumstances that surround this decision. And I'm going to say I'm still on the fence about it. I know we are close. We are very close to getting him a cell phone. And maybe it's just me trying to preserve that little piece of childhood a little bit longer. We're going to get him one, but here's what I have realized. We're going to do it on our own time and kind of remove that pressure of needing to decide before his birthday, which is really, really soon. And thankfully, I will mention, there are still some other things on his birthday list besides a phone. Thank you so much for listening to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein. This episode is edited by Megan Littlefield. Of course, thank you to Maine Health for sponsoring Raising Me. Please follow Raising Me wherever you get your podcasts and consider a like and a share so others find it as well. Wherever you are, I hope you learned something new and get to take a little time for you.